Hey everybody, Plushie here, and finally, it is time to talk about the extremely exciting anniversary servant, Space Ereshkigal. And she is definitely one of the most interestingly gameplay designed characters in a long time, and I literally just said that about Aoko, so you can tell that the innovation in terms of servant kits is kind of going through the roof this year. And she has so much love put into her kit that she actually got an affection gauge, which is a completely isolated and unique gimmick only tied to her that even comes with a unique UI. Now, I have a more detailed video discussing how her affection gauge works and how you can charge it up and the impact of charging it up. So you can check out the video right now on the top right corner or from the description. So I don't have to go into detail again in this video regarding her affection gauge. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's get into today's hot take video about Space Eresh. So looking at Space Eresh's base stats, it's honestly pretty mediocre and a little bit underwhelming even. Her attack stat is pretty middle of the road, even a little bit below average, and her card gain per hit is actually pretty low at only a 0.33%, and it's not like she has really high hit count face cards to compensate for it. She has a 4 hit arts card and a 5 hit quick card, which looks like quite a bit of hits, but with this poor base MP gain, ends up being just pretty mediocre face cards in terms of MP gain in general. And also her deck is just pretty standard, BBAAQ really fits her playstyle overall as an arts AoE DPS. So yeah, there's nothing too interesting to talk about here. However, what is interesting is of course her beast class. So as we suspected, the beast class triangle is unique to every beast servant. So this is completely different from what Draco does. And in fact, it's almost the opposite of what Draco does. So Space Ereshkigal does 1.5 times damage to all extra class servants except for Beast and Avengers. In terms of Avengers, she only does half damage. And Space Eresh also takes half damage from all extra classes except for Avengers and Beast, because it's neutral against Beast. I guess Beast don't really count as extra classes in terms of this kind of stuff. And she also takes double damage from Avengers. So essentially she's weak against Avengers but strong against every other extra class, and she's completely neutral in terms of interacting with the standard 7 classes, including Berserkers. So she deals and takes neutral from Berserkers as well. So just because of how extra classes still tend to be more rare, especially in farming in this game, I think this is a pretty fair class triangle. It technically is better than Draco's because Draco had to be, disadvantaged against every extra class just to be strong against the 7 classes. And she isn't weak to every standard class to be strong against all the extra classes. The only gripe people might have with her is her interaction with Berserkers because, she doesn't do double damage like most other servants in the game. I think only her and Mash deals one-time damage to Berserkers. And in particularly for farming, people usually pray for Berserker nodes because Berserker is basically farmable by every servant. And with Space Eresh, you're not going to have that easy a time farming Berserkers compared to everyone else in the game. But other than that, honestly, I think this is fine because her damage is extremely consistent across most farming scenarios. And in terms of challenge quests, I also think this is a very fair triangle. Like with so many extra class bosses in the game right now, it's actually kind of insane how she just counters most of the modern story bosses. The fact that she takes neutral from Berserkers can actually be a good thing in challenge quest scenarios because she is considerably more tanky than most other servants that take 1.5 times damage. So before we even get into her skill set, because her skill set actually contains massive cooldown reductions, I need to sort of talk about Append 5. Now, if you're not aware, this anniversary, Lasengo also added 2 extra append skills to the game, and it obviously costed a giant shitstorm and it forced them to respond. If you do follow my channel, you probably know exactly what happened. However, for those less informed, Append 5 is a brand new append skill that allow you to reduce the cooldown of all 3 of your servant's skills for one time. 3 triggers that has to be applied to 3 different skills. Like, I cannot save the 3 triggers just to use on her first skill 3 times. Because of how like cooldown reduction reliant Space Eresh is, especially in terms of farming, I will have to say this is probably her most important append skill, even more so than append 2, and it drastically changes her effectiveness in farming. So whenever I talk about potentially recasting her skills during farming, that's why she's able to do it, specifically with append 5. Space Eresh's first skill is a 3-turn 20% attack up and MP damage up for the entire party, a party-wide 20 MP battery, and a 3-turn party-wide 100% death resist up, and finally, as a small demerit, she poisons the entire party for 3 turns with a 500 damage poison. Now, this is in a vacuum already a really good skill. The combination of the 20 party charge as well as the 20% attack and MP damage steroid makes this an amazing multi-core farming skill. The death resist up is a nice little bonus. Even though it's not immunity, there's still a potential that the boss can insta-kill you through this, but in certain cases, this is just a nice bonus. Once again, she doesn't have to have this effect at all, and this would still be a fine skill. And the poison is also pretty inconsequential, especially considering the fact that she is an art servant. Your party would most likely just be using Castora's MP to purge it. The only annoying part about this is that it will eat up any form of debuff immunity if it's like by how many times it triggers. This is kind of foreshadowing, but we'll see later. And the skill has a 6-turn cooldown, but that's not actually the skill's cooldown, because Space Eresh's third skill reduces her entire skill set's cooldown by 2. So this is realistically a 4-turn cooldown skill, and when you take that into consideration, that's pretty insane. Even if you just count this as a self-steroid, being able to trigger this every 4 turns is quite insane. And this is also very useful in farming, because now with the help of append 5, this is essentially a 3-turn cooldown skill. So as long as you have any form of additional cooldown reduction, even if just by 1, she'll be able to double cast this skill. Space Eresh's second skill is a 50 MP battery, but on top of that, it also is a 20 star bomb, a 1-turn 500% star absorb up, and it gives her a 1-turn on attack effect, which grants her 100% crit up whenever she attacks with her face card before the face card actually does damage, all on a 7-turn cooldown. So first and foremost, for farming, this is a 5-turn cooldown battery because, as I said earlier, her skill 3 can reduce all of her cooldown by 2, and this actually allows her to double cast it, in Atlas looping comps, and we'll get into that a little bit later when talking about her farming. But on top of being a actually short cooldown 50 MP battery, this is also one of the strongest 1-turn crit boosting skills in the game. It gives you everything you need in the toolbox. It gives you the stars to crit with, it gives you the absorb up to absorb those stars to crit with, and it gives you perhaps one of the strongest 1-turn crit steroids in the game. So if you pick 3 cards from Space Eresh, the first card will be doing 100% extra crit damage, the second card will be doing 200% extra crit damage, and the third card will be doing a whopping 300% extra crit damage, which is quite insane. And this only applies to normal face cards and not the MP. So if you have this skill activated in the challenge quest and you happen to have a Brave Chain from Space Eresh, you might even want to not use her MP and just use a full face card chain for potentially better damage. Obviously that depends on the MP level of your Space Eresh, but this is just such a fun skill. Because Space Eresh's entire kit is not built around critting, instead of trying to give her some form of weird sustainable crit steroid, they just said, okay, you can go ham for a single turn and then proceed to forget about using her face cards for the following couple of turns, which is, I think, an interesting way to design a crit skill instead of, going for more sustainable crit steroid. Space Ereshkigal's third skill is a 2-time 3-turn invul that also is a 1-time 3-turn guts that revives her with 3000 HP. It also heals her for 3000, removes all of her debuffs, and also increases her buff removal resist for 1-time 3 turns by 100%. And finally, it also reduces all of her skill cooldown by 2. So this is potentially the strongest skill in her kit because it enables all of her skills to be at very short cooldown. And on top of that, it is a mix of different tools that can potentially be used to deal against challenge quest gimmicks. The invul and the guts are great survival effects, the heal is nice sustain, the debuff cleanse is always going to be useful as long as the boss does any form of debuff, especially against very devastating types of debuffs, and finally the buff removal resist is always a premium effect to have on a DPS. However, I will say it is quite difficult to get value out of all of them at once because tying an invul to a guts and a heal at the same time is usually not the best idea. Maybe you want to use, the heal after the guts trigger to pull your HP back up, or maybe you just want to block the MP with your invul instead of taking it face on with the guts. You can definitely utilize more of its effects at once during solos, but in most team play, I would say usually it's just going to be 2 to 3 effects that are useful, and even then it is already really good. And once again, the cooldown reduction effect is probably its main purpose. And now let's take a look at the long list of passives that Space Ereshkigal has. Her first passive is just a 3-time debuff immunity, which is of course very strong, especially considering a lot of modern bosses like to open up the fight by debuffing your entire party. Well, you just don't get to do that with Space Eresh. This also can help during some raid events that also like to debuff your party upon entry, so really useful passive. This is also why I brought up the poison demerit on her first skill. It does eat up a stack of it if you do choose to use it, but it's probably not that big a deal. 2-time debuff immunity is usually good enough, and if you really need all 3 times, then just hold off on using her skills for a bit. Space Eresh's second passive just gives her 5 MP whenever she is normal attacking with a face card. Well, guess we know why her base face card gain is that bad now. This honestly doesn't really fix her poor arts card base gain, but for her quick and buster cards in particular, that's a huge buff. She of course also has Goddess Essence. It increases her own debuff resistance by 14%. It's only 14% because it's E-, but she does have debuff immunity for 3 times after all. She also gets critical damage against Servant by 20%, which is also quite a hefty critical steroid just as a passive, and most of the times against like Gauntlet Quest and the final wave of farming, you are fighting against Servants, so this is also extremely useful for boosting her card damage. She also of course has the standard independent manifestation, like most other beasts, basically means nothing, and she is immune to stun, petrify, bound, and pigify, which is also very useful against certain bosses. And finally, Space Eresh has the affection gauge, and I'm not going to explain all of this here. I have a full video explaining how all of this work, but essentially she has an affection gauge that has 10 different levels that you can fill up by doing different actions, and for each extra affection level, her MP will do 10% more damage as a special anti-trait. And also when you reach certain threshold of levels, her MP will do extra effects. So this is basically what her entire gameplay is built around. Once again, I have a more detailed video discussing how this entire affection gauge thing works, so I'm not going to elaborate here. If you're interested, please check out the video in the description. Space Ereshkigal's MP is an AoE 5-hit arts MP that has pretty mediocre refund to be honest, but it's kind of fine because she has a lot of battery charge. The base effects of the MP are also pretty underwhelming. It just removes all offensive buffs, which is a pretty solid effect, but not good enough as its sole effect, and it also has a 60% chance to insta-kill, which absolutely sucks. However, the MP ranks up as your affection level increases. So at affection level 4, the MP gains a 100% insta-kill chance boost, boosting that 60% to a 120%. But it's still not that great as an insta-kill farmer compared to Dolman and Nidokris Alter, but it's kind of okay, I guess. And then at affection level 7, she gains arguably the most important two effects in her MP, which is the Invul Pierce and the Defense Ignore. These are also one-turn buffs that is applied to her, and instead of just tied to the MP damage, meaning that the face cards following her MP would also ignore defense and pierce invul. And finally, at affection level 10, the MP generates a whopping 50 stars whenever it is activated. Considering how spammable this arts MP is in a standard arts team, this is really broken because this allows the entire party to have guaranteed crits very often, and this not just helps her own MP gain, but also her party teammates' MP gain. This is arguably the only resource that arts teams struggle to generate, but now with Space Eresh, they don't have to worry about this either. And then finally, the MP also has universal anti-trait that scales with how many affection levels you have. For each affection level, she deals 10% extra damage, and at max affection levels, she deals a whopping 200% special effective damage, or essentially double her base damage, which is obviously really powerful. It's like, for example, if you're talking about, summer, in farming, on the final wave, it's a giant burst turn, right? But that's only 50% extra damage or 150% super effective. With Space Eresh, even in farming, you can confidently get to level 6 or level 7, which is already higher than most standard anti-traits, and it is also universal, so it's super strong. And of course, the overcharge effect beyond Overcharge 1 is to give Space Eresh 5 extra points of affection, which is essentially half an affection level worth of points, which is pretty powerful when you pair her with specific supports. So overall, the MP is extremely cracked. It's pretty good in farming for universal anti-trade, and in challenge quests in particular, because it's pretty easy to reach affection level 10 by like turn 5, the MP just becomes super cracked and can support your entire team by supplying them with stars, as well as ignore both defensive and offensive buffs, which is of course also super powerful in challenge quests. The only gripe I have is the overcharge effect after you reach affection level 10 just doesn't do anything anymore, but honestly, with such a cracked MP, maybe it's best for it to not do anything. So before we even get into how Space Eresh's farming works, we have to talk a little bit about her affection gauge gimmick. Now, I have a full video talking about how her affection gauge works, so today we're only going to look at 3 points that will affect your farming greatly. So first and foremost, she always starts at affection level 2, so do go bond 5 her, otherwise she will be missing 5 points of affection at round start. Number 2, you gain affection points from using her skills. So whenever you use one of her skills, you gain 3 affection points. But an additional condition is at the start of every turn, if the first skill you activate from a servant belongs to Ereshkigal, you will gain an additional 2 points of affection. So essentially, what you can do in a standard looping comp is not use all of her skills on the same turn, and instead use one of her skills on each separate turns to get 5 points out of each skill instead of only 5 points from one of the skills and 3 points from the other 2. And finally, you can also get affection points by selecting Space Ereshkigal's face cards, not including her MP. You get 3 points for doing that, but whenever you chain a Brave Chain, you gain additional 6 points of affection. Once again, as a reminder, every 10 points of affection raises the affection level by 1. So what this means is that your card RNG actually affects your looping damage. So there are 2 extensions we need to talk about regarding these 2 affection gimmicks. So first and foremost, regarding the skills. If you are using a composition that desire to recast her skills after initial use, which will involve using Atlas Mystic Code or plugging in Koyan Light, then of course you blow all of your skills on turn 1 in order to get all of their cooldowns back on turn 3. However, in terms of a normal looping comp with Double Castoria plug Oberon, where you don't get to recast any of her skills, the suggested way is to stagger her skills, as I mentioned earlier, so not using all of her skills in a single turn. Now, in terms of face cards, this one's a doozy. So your face cards you get 5 cards within 3 turns. And assuming in a normal farming scenario, you don't get to reshuffle your hand. And there are a couple of combinations of hands that will determine your last wave damage. So the best hand they can possibly get is a 2-card, 2-card, 1-card hand. Split across 3 turns, of course. Because with this hand, you get to chain 2 Brave Chains, meaning that you will get 2 Brave Chain bonuses by gaining 6 points for each. And the second best hand you can get is a hand of 3 cards and 2 cards. So on the 3-card hand, you aren't able to use all 3 of your cards and your MP card, but you can still use 2 of your cards, and you make a Brave Chain. And on the 2-card hand turn, you can also make another Brave Chain. So you're only missing out on 1 face card selection as opposed to the perfect scenario. And then yet another slightly worse hand than that is a 3-card hand, but then a 1-card hand, and then another 1-card hand. Because this is basically the last hand, but you don't get to chain a second Brave Chain, and you select the same amount of total face cards. A 4-card hand and a 1-card hand. Because in a 4-card hand, you're forced to give up 2 face cards on that turn, because you can only pick MP and then 2 cards. And then 1 additional card on a separate turn. And then finally, the worst possible hand you can get for Ereshkigal farming is Full House, 5-card hand. Because if you get a 5-card hand, you're forced to discard 3 of your cards for, farming. You don't get to activate any of their affection points because you can only choose 2 cards alongside your MP. That's the worst case scenario. And of course, the 2-2-1 card hand split, for example, it can be 2 cards on 1, 2 cards on 2, 1 card on 3. It can also be 1 card on 1, 2 card on 2, and 2 cards on 3. And obviously you want more cards earlier because you can front load more affection levels earlier. So a 2-2-1 hand is better than a 1-2-2 hand, for example. Now, if all of that sounds extremely complicated, I already tried. I tried to simplify this as much as possible, so I apologize, but if you don't really want to bother to understand all of that, just remember these couple of golden rules. First and foremost, try to pick as many of her cards as possible, and try to form as many Brave Chains as possible with her cards. Also, whenever you enter a turn, if you can use her skills, use them first before using any other of your servant skills. And then finally, if your Mystic Code has any useless skills like a heal or a debuff cleanse or an invul in terms of farming, throw them onto her as fast as possible to front load a lot of affection points. If you follow all of these points, you will be able to maximize your farming damage when using Space Eresh. So as I mentioned before, with Space Eresh, you can either take Double Castoria Plug Oberon and use her as a normal Arts Looper, or you can do Double Castoria Atlas Academy Mystic Code. Because with Atlas Academy Mystic Code, you can recast all of Space Eresh's skill, giving her an additional 70 MP battery. The exact same number as Oberon giving you 70 extra MP battery. So any comp that is doable with Plug Oberon should also be doable with Atlas, albeit the damage spread is a little bit different. So we're going to be evaluating these 2 different comps. So the first case study is of course Summer Ibuki, the top dog in arts looping. What's interesting about Summer Ibuki is that because of the introduction of Append 5, Space Eresh is not the only unit that can run Atlas with Double Castoria. Summer Ibuki can actually also double cast all of her skills on turn 3 with Double Castoria Atlas. So as you can see here, when we're talking about the standard Double Castoria Plug Oberon comp, Space Eresh is not going to be beating Summer Ibuki. In fact, not even that close, but we all know that Summer Ibuki, doesn't even need to ramp up, and she has still the highest wave 3 damage because of that Berserker class advantage. It's extremely difficult for neutral DPSs to beat, and it remains to be the case in the most standard arts looping comp. However, the interesting thing about Space Eresh is that, as I mentioned mentioned earlier, when you're using Atlas, you're actually not missing out on total amount of MP charge, and also you can actually front load more damage on earlier waves, in sacrifice to having less damage on those third wave, quite a bit less damage, mind you. But yeah, there are certain wave compositions in farming that actually front loads a lot of high HP enemies, so there actually is some merit to running Atlas over Plug Oberon, but those situations are going to be few and far between. Of course, we also have Summer Melusine, because I think she is the current strongest neutral AoE arts looper, and her damage doesn't really beat Space Eresh, but those two still function a little bit differently. Summer Melusine can very easily loop just without much help, to be honest. She has an 80 battery and really high base refund on her MP, unlike Space Eresh, who has a 70 MP battery and pretty mediocre base refund. So it's going to be a lot harder to allow Space Eresh to loop unless you give her a lot of MP charge, as opposed to Summer Melusine. So I'm not going to say Space Eresh is better. They simply perform different jobs, and overall I'd say Space Eresh sort of ties with Summer Melusine as being the best neutral art super right now in the game, and still worse than Summer Ibuki. And really, which one's better depends on what kind of job you prefer each one to do, but they can both usually do the same kind of job really well, so it's really down to preference, just like most AoE arts loopers. I think one of the biggest strengths in terms of Space Ereshkigal's looping is, of course, the freedom in team building, because she works with a lot of cooldown reduction supports, as I mentioned earlier. So the two optimal comps that you see are probably going to remain the same on screen with Atlas versus Plug Oberon, but you can also replace one of the Castorias with other cooldown reduction supports, such as Summer Ibuki is a decent example. If you don't have your own Castoria, you can give up on a lot of battery, but also recast her first skill instead, and that can actually yield more damage because her first skill has a MP damage up steroid, and Oberon doubles that. So I still don't recommend if you already have Castoria, but if you don't, you can kind of patch it up that way. You can also, of course, swap one of them out for Koyan Light if you want to, and I do believe if you are against man attribute enemies, that's actually slightly better than double Castoria. I didn't do the detailed comp calculations, I apologize. Space Eresh, of course, also has the benefit of enabling Castoria as MPs with her skill 1, because her skill 1's a party-wide 20 MP charge. And in terms of these three like AoE arts looper damage comparisons I did earlier, when you include Castoria as MP, Space Eresh actually gets a lot out of it, because she not just gets the attack up from Castoria's MP itself, but she also gets extra affection levels. If you want to know more about this kind of comparison, you can check out my great friend Rio Emerald's channel, where he has a video detailing the differences, and I'll link it in the description as well. And then finally, you can even, plug in Koyan Light in a double Castoria plug comp instead of plugging in Oberon, because essentially Koyan Light's skill 1 act as an Atlas Mystico that also gives 50 charge. So you're still going to be doing the same amount of damage as the Atlas comp. You can front load more affection and all that, all the same, but you also get 50 extra charge. So it's actually more total extra charge than Oberon, which can allow you to deal with specific weird numbered nodes. I will say most of the time it's not worth it though, unless you're fighting against man attribute enemies. So overall, that's the real strength of Space Eresh looping. It's not that she performs the best in optimal comps, but it's that there are more comps that actually works with her. And of course, she also has, multi-core utility with that skill 1. That skill 1 in itself is already really powerful, because 20% charge plus 20% attack and MP damage steroid is a really nice combo. And once again, with cooldown reduction by 1, she can double cast it. And if she double casts it, it almost feels like Tonaliko's skill 3, right? It's a party 40 charge and 40% attack up, 40% MP damage up. It's really strong. You can pair her with obviously other cooldown reducing DPSs like Summer Ibuki, or even some single targets works with her as well, such as Okuni and Maid Alter, even though I don't actually think there are that many good combos with her as opposed to Tonaliko, because there are more overcharge givers than cooldown reducers in terms of multi-core DPSs, but still, this is yet another choice. Once again, showing how Ereshkigal's strength lies in her diversity in terms of team comps rather than her optimal performance. In terms of challenge quest performance, there really isn't that many interesting things to talk about Space Ereshkigal, and it's not because she's too weak. it's quite the contrary. It's actually because she's too strong, or rather her kit basically covers every scenario that I cannot really nitpick about anything. Her skill 3, of course, is really powerful. It has a couple of really special effects that counter certain gimmicks, such as the buff more resist and the debuff cleanse, and it just being a general invul, guts, and heal severely increases her sustainability. But most importantly, that skill reduces the cooldown of all of her other skills by 2, so her entire skill set just has extremely short cooldown. For example, her first skill being a party-wide 20 MP charge, in farming might just seem like a multi-core thing, but as we've demonstrated in farming, it can help Castoria use their MP as well, and this remains the same with challenge quests. In fact, in challenge quests, because of how short this cooldown is, being only on a 4-turn cooldown, this will yield you even more value in terms of activating not just her own, but also her support's MPs across a very long fight. Her skill 2, of course, also supplies her with massive amounts of crit burst potential if there is a turn where she doesn't have her MP, which is going to be few and far between because she is an arts looping MP unit. However, even during those downtimes, that skill 2 once again allows her to do very respectable burst damage with face cards, even though in most cases I'd say you will just be using it as a 50 MP battery, but then even with that in mind, a 50 MP battery on a 5-turn cooldown is pretty strong in terms of a challenge quest unit. Space Eresh, of course, also has some passives that helps her CQ, mainly the 3-time debuff immunity, as I've mentioned earlier, how it's good at blocking round start debuff effects as well as on break debuff effects, so it's really good. And of course, the MP, super broken at affection level 10. It permanently deals 100% extra damage against everything as an anti-trait. It ignores defense, pierces invul, makes 50 stars whenever it happens. Once again, helps both herself and her supports, because you're going to be getting a lot more MP gain by selecting your Castoria arts cards, your Tamok arts cards, your other art supports arts cards in general, and that's just really good as well, right? And it's not just that how broken the MP is at affection 10, it's how easy it is to reach affection 10. Like we already saw, she can reach like affection 8 or something in farming, which is only 3 turns. So it's gonna be a lot easier to reach affection 10 in challenge quest because there's not that much time pressure. You can easily reach it by turn 5 or turn 6, and by that time she just becomes a really broken AoE arts challenge quest unit. I'd even argue she might be the strongest AoE arts challenge quest DPS just because of how much she does. And her team comp is also kind of boring. You know, it's just the standard arts DPS Castoria and secondary arts support. I will say the secondary arts support I prefer Tamamo over Proto Merlin, because I think Space Eresh, with already how short her cooldowns are on her skills, snowballs very hard with Tamamo. And especially considering her skill 1 also helps Tamamo get her MP back, it just creates this positive feedback loop and you create like an unkillable team. Space Eresh's solo is also really good. Like having such short cooldowns on such powerful skills is going to be really good naturally. And of course, Space Eresh bypasses the one big issue that arts MP units have during soloing, because usually you don't want to do a mighty chain, you want to do MPAA and try to spam your MP as much as possible, but the problem with that is you don't make stars. But Space Eresh at affection 10 makes 50 stars, so you don't have to actually consider mighty chains at all with Space Eresh in terms of most solos, which is pretty hilarious, but it makes her also pretty boring in terms of solos. And reaching her affection 10 during solos is really easy as well, because you get to use Brave Chains every turn, right? I will say though, Space Eresh doesn't have that many partners to patch her problems up, so even though she has guaranteed crits every turn, you might still feel her poor base card gain on her arts. But on the flip side, I'll say her skill 3 is even more valuable in a solo, because I can realistically see a situation where the heal and the invul sort of delays your guts turn, and you push it until the guts is about to expire before it triggers, so you have better like cooldown cycles with Space Eresh's survival skills, unlike in a team where you're not going to take advantage of all three of those effects at once, like ever. In conclusion, Space Eresh is designed to be broken at affection 10 because you have to fill up that affection gauge to reach that state. However, in my opinion, they made it a little bit too easy to fill up her affection gauge, resulting in Space Eresh being broken by design. As an AoE arts looper, she still kind of loses to Summer Ibuki because the Berserker advantage is just a little bit too good. However, Space Eresh doesn't shine in terms of performing the best in a optimal comp, but instead she shines in the fact that she's able to fit into so many different diverse comps in farming and can adapt according to the farming node. So Space Eresh might be one of the most flexible arts loopers in the game, despite that archetype in itself being very monotonous and boring. In terms of challenge quests, Space Eresh is once again just overtuned. The team containing Space Eresh, Tamamo, and Castoria is nigh unbeatable, and I can't really imagine any modern boss fight that can stop that team. And then once again, because of her class, she only gets countered by Avengers. So in terms of not having to get counterclass, she is the most universal DPS in the game as well. And finally, as a soloer, she is also very solid because of her short cooldowns and the fact that she's able to generate 50 stars with her Arts MP, allowing her to keep on spamming Arts Brave Chains instead of having to, use some of your turns to generate stars and have better crits and whatnot. She just doesn't really care. So Space Ereshkigal overall is just really strong, and her only weakness is the fact that when you borrow her, you don't get the affection gauge and she becomes considerably weaker, but that's all the more reasons to pull for her. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and this is another long one like the Aoko one, and it got further delayed because of Summer CL's release. I apologize, but I hope this isn't too bad to release like 3 days before the banner ends, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.